this is basically just a list of sociologists and what they said. So yeah, and then Jung again defined by its functions, in this case answering philosophical questions, the questions that science can't necessarily answer. Okay. And then the last one, the social constructionist definitions are proposed by Aldridge, and they argue that actually it's defined by its meaning to a follower. So in the case of Scientology, which is on the next thing, it isn't recognised in France and Germany as a religion. In fact, the French and German governments are quite anti-Scientology, but to its followers, they do see it as a religion, and they see it as performing the same functions that religion performs. And then just going through the bit in standard functionalism, Durkheim studied what he called totemism in Aboriginal tribes in places like Australia and the South Pacific. And he argues that the worship of the totem, if you like, is worship of the norms and values of society, and then by extension you are then worshipping the collective conscience and society itself through that. So it's a way of binding you to society as well as binding you together. And then Malinowski, he spoke about the roles that ceremonies perform, and actually they perform psychological functions. In their case, he studied the Trobriand Islands and how their fishing rituals actually help them to feel calmer before going out to fish in the deep ocean, which is also, you will remember and will be in your notes from last year, so I'm not going to go into it too deeply. A criticism of this actually is from Tambia, that ceremonies don't just perform psychological functions, but they can also perform social functions as well. So the yam sharing ritual that the Trobriand Islanders had was a form of, trying to remember how the ritual goes now, but it's a form of sharing yams with people when, I believe it's when you get engaged, you share yams with the bride's father, I think it was, and that was the idea, to sort of bind you together socially as well as perform a psychological function.
And can I put in there then, so things like weddings and funerals, as well as helping the individual, are very, very similar to that in that they are performing social functions too.
Okay, and then Parsons, who is the obvious one to go to if you can't remember anything, is that his quote was that religion provides a tonic to self-confidence, and it gives you guidelines for norms and behaviour as well. So he agreed with what the functionalist before has, and then added to it by saying it is also giving you, it's guiding you, giving you norms and values. But then, of course, you could criticise it by saying, well, actually, Glockenstadt said actually there are many schisms amongst religion, especially Christianity and Islam. If you look at the wars that IS are fighting in the Middle East, actually it is because of different branches of Islam that they believe to be blasphemous or not correct, basically. So actually, it does perform a divisive function as much as it does a binding function. And then traditional Marxism is that Marx said that religion is the sign of the oppressed creature and the opium of the masses. I've heavily condensed that quote because it's too long and dull, really. So then he argued that actually what religion does is it seeks to explain, or how people use religion is they will seek to explain the existing social order through religious means. So in the case of All Things Bright and Beautiful, it's hundreds of years old as him, and that one verse that goes, the rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, he made them high or lowly and ordered their estate. And that's actually saying, well, it's right that there are poor people and that there are rich people. We shouldn't be going against God's will to try and change the social order. And that justified things like divine right of kings as to why, like still today, we have a monarch in Buckingham Palace and then people living on the streets. And you could argue religion is still used to defend that social order. And then neo-Marxism is a bit more friendly towards religion in that sense. I say friendly, but O'Toole said that religion has what's called relative autonomy, and that it isn't directly controlled by the bourgeoisie or directly controlled by the state. So it does have freedom then to challenge the ruling class, as Gramsci said. It can be a force of hegemony, but it can also challenge the ruling class. So it just depends on how it's used and who the people are who are using it.
In the exam, you need to give some really topical examples to back that up. Really do. Yeah, so that picture there is from the Egyptian Spring, I think it was 2011. And the man on the right, you can see holding a cross, and the man on the left, you can't quite make it out, but it is actually the Quran. So in Egypt, you had the Muslim Brotherhood, the ruling party there, but quite repressive, and they were overthrown by a popular revolution. And Egypt, it hasn't quite stabilised yet, but it's still in a situation of transition. But in Egypt, it was a religious revolution. Actually, it was used to overthrow a repressive regime, and it's now hopefully moving towards them. Less oppressive regime. And then moving on to Engels, he said actually early Christianity
is similar to modern Marxism in that Christianity was a slave religion. It emerged in the slaves. The Bible has passages written specifically directed to slaves to say, obey your masters, for instance. And actually, it's similar to Marxism in that they are both about resisting the oppression that you're felt and that I felt in society. And then Majora is that religion can be a revolutionary force. So the example of that would be in Latin America, revolutions were supported by Catholic bishops. In the former Soviet Union, there was a big Catholic aspect to overthrowing the communist governments, or communist, I should be saying, governments there as well. And then feminism. That image on the left there, I was just interested to see what would come up if I just searched purity into Google search, and then you got the average things like white flowers and doves, but then the first human image to come up was a woman. So that was just a really interesting social experiment I did there. There are loads of different sociologies you can use for feminism, so I don't suggest learning all of these, maybe just 3 or 4. So Armstrong argues that women are marginalised from the upper echelons, from the top of religions. So you could say actually, in the Church of England, although women bishops are now allowed, they are still marginalised from becoming bishops because A, it's only very recent, and B, there are still people within the church who reject it. And then Woodhead argues that there are actually religious forms of feminism, and that you can use religion to celebrate femininity, which could be seen as oppressive, like the hijab. One of the sociologists further down says that actually a lot of Muslim women use the hijab as a source of resistance to oppression, that once they put it on, they can go out and take part in society. But then you could criticise that and say, well, arguably they shouldn't have to be wearing, they shouldn't have to cover themselves in order to take part in society. So you've got this sort of two-sided coin there. And then you've got Home saying that women actually play a subordinate role in the private sphere, so they are the ones at home who are subordinate to the men, and that's paralleled in religion, in that they can't take the top roles, they are simply there to be passive and listen. And then de Beauvoir, again, women are taught to be passive by religion, which keeps them out of work as well, because the capitalist system is all about competition and being the best at something. And if women are encouraged to be passive, like they are by religion, then they're simply not going to get ahead, and they're just going to be forced to stay at home, if you like. In Al-Sadawi, the religious scripture has been interpreted by men, which they then use to justify patriarchy, so that's similar to Marx's view as well. You know, you can read different religious scriptures and different people can interpret it in different ways, and you know, she argues that the ones who have power in society, the ones who have power within the religion, are the ones who interpret it and said, this is what it means, this is what you will do, and then that is what then used to justify women not having top jobs or being told to be passive and obedient. And then Watson, this was what I was saying earlier, just that Muslim women actually do choose to wear the hijab as a source of pride, both as part of their identity and to resist oppression, and use it as a symbol to then go and take part in traditional society. And then Swale argues that religions have actually been split over attempts at modernisation. So I said the fellow, there was I don't know if you saw the videos when Libby Lane was being consecrated as the first Anglican bishop, Church of England bishop, rather, woman Church of England bishop, and there was a man who actually came up and said, no, this isn't in the Bible, we shouldn't be doing it, it is wrong. And while he was ignored, it does show actually that there are still splits within religions to this day about where modernisation attempts are going. And then, yeah.